Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening to all of you worldwide. I'm Tatiana Mosso from the IMF Communications Department, and I will be your host for today's Fiscal Monitor press briefing, Spending Smarter, How Efficient and Well-Allocated Public Spending Can Boost Economic Growth. This is the title. And I'm delighted to welcome our speakers, Vitor Gaspar, Director of the Fiscal Affairs Department, Ira Dabla-Norris, Deputy Director of FAD, and Davide Foceri, Division Chief of FAD. Good morning, Vitor, Ira, and Davide. Vitor, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Tatiana. Many thanks for your kind introduction. Thanks to you all for your interest in the Fiscal Monitor, covering fiscal policies around the world. The global public debt prospects and risks have deteriorated further since our last meeting in April. In the Fiscal Monitor, global public debt is projected to rise above 100% of GDP by 2029. In such a scenario, public debt would be at its highest level since 1948. Moreover, the distribution of risks is tilted towards debt accumulating even faster. With a 5% risk, debt would reach 124% in 2029. The world public debt landscape is very diverse. This map displays the fund's fiscal risk assessment based on the latest debt sustainability framework from Article 4 staff reports. Countries differ widely in their deficit and debt levels. Many major economies have public debt greater or projected to go over 100% of GDP. Among the G20, these are Canada, China, France, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. These countries typically have deep and liquid sovereign bond markets and often broad policy choices resulting in their fiscal risk ratings being moderate, yellow, or low, green. In contrast, many emerging markets and low-income countries face tougher fiscal challenges despite their debt often below 60% of GDP. Their policy options and funding access are limited. As the map shows, 55 countries are assessed at high, pink, or distress level, red, of fiscal risk. In many cases, relatively low debt to GDP ratios are accompanied by low debt tolerance. Beyond the present, fiscal risks loom large. Public debt dynamics have drastically changed in recent years. It's not only the size of debt, but also the cost. From the global financial crisis through to the COVID period, ever lower interest rates accompanied rising debts, leading to an overall stable interest bill on budget. However, the situation is now starkly different. Interest rate increases have raised funding costs and strained budget. Indeed, interest spending is estimated to increase to 2.9% of GDP in 2025 from 2% in 2020 and is projected to continue to rise to the end of the decade. The financial environment is also exigent. Financial asset valuations are stretched. Eventually, a market correction may occur. Among adverse scenarios, the most concerning is one where fiscal financial feedback loops dominate the propagation mechanism of some initial liquidity disturbance. In addition, public spending pressures come from defense to response to natural disasters. At the same time, there is considerable resistance to higher taxes. The inescapable conclusion is that starting from too high deficits and debt, the persistence of spending above tax revenues will push debt to ever high heights, threatening sustainability and financial stability. So, prioritizing fiscal policy is essential to support debt sustainability and prepare fiscal buffers to use in case of severe adverse shocks, including financial crisis. But while we do recognize that the fiscal equation is very hard to square politically, the time to prepare is now. Improving growth prospects and enhancing public trust in government help balance the fiscal equation. Fiscal policy, structural policy. Deploying fiscal structural policy improves growth prospects and reinforces complementarities and synergies with the private sector. The government can change the composition of public spending while keeping the overall spending envelope constant. For example, shifting the budget composition towards growth-friendly areas like education and infrastructure can increase the economy's productive capacity and improve growth prospects. Enhancing spending efficiency can also further amplify these benefits. Countries should also prioritize institutional reforms, good governance, government effectiveness, transparency and accountability, provide foundations for citizens and investors, trust, helping finance and growth. My colleagues and I are ready to answer your questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vitor. So before we open the floor to questions, quick ground rules. Raise your hand, wait for us to come with the mic, introduce yourself, and for those online, please send your question to the WebEx and we will get to you shortly. So first question, gentleman on the second row. Can you see him? Just in the middle, in the center. Can you stand up, please, for you? It will be easier if you can. Thank you.
Hi, Daniel Davis, Agence France Presse. Thanks for taking my question. I just wonder, in your report, you talk about the higher degree of rigidity in public spending in advanced economies being not solely attributable to entitlements like pensions and social assistance, but that is a big part of it. You've seen just in the last day or so that France looks set to drop unpopular pension reforms. I just wonder what your prescription is, what your advice is for countries like France, looking to push through these changes to its pensions. Thanks.
So thank you so much for your question. When it comes to France, our advice has been for France to engage in gradual fiscal consolidation to put debt and deficit under control. And that is actually something that France is committed to do in the context of the European fiscal procedures in accordance with the medium-term plan that France itself has produced. In our view, the measures that have the path that has been put forward in that plan is enough to stabilize public debt towards the end of the decade. The news that there is a basis for a budget for 2026 in France is good. And at this point in time, it is up for the French political system to discuss the options to bring that forward.
Thank you. Let's stay in the center. The lady with the, can you stand up? Yes, it's easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Fiona. I'm a broadcast journalist from Rwanda. Given that 15% is framed as a minimum tax to GDP ratio for growth takeoff, I'm really curious to understand what reforms, fiscal reforms especially, or even capacity building measures that IMF would recommend, especially for emerging countries struggling with low revenue mobilization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm actually quite grateful for that question. We have put out recently a couple of papers looking at exactly that question, a working paper and a departmental paper with many more details. So we have been arguing for years that there is a tipping point in the tax to GDP ratio above which growth benefits from the role of state in development and a number of other favorable dynamics take hold. So the idea is that tax capacity, taxation is fundamental to enable the state to play its role in development. The working paper has a subtitle, Taxing for Takeoff. What they show with very detailed time series analysis is that it's not only the tipping point that matters. What matters is what happens after you cross the tipping point. And the countries that persevere, cross the tipping point, and after a long period of time, of 10 years or more, approach 15% of GDP, reap growth dividends, but also broader benefits like improvements in public financial management, government effectiveness, and even the development of domestic bond markets. How does this all take place? It seems to take place because when you pass a minimum in terms of your tax capacity, you have to rely more and more on voluntary compliance on the part of the taxpayer. And that requires a broad process of reform that gives the citizens of the country what the citizens of the country demand. And that triggers a virtuous circle. I'm actually very proud of our ability to found the 15% minimum level for the tax to GDP ratio.
Next, the gentleman here on my right.
Thank you. My question is about Latin America. The region still faces high public debt and high real interest rates. Does the IMF think the region is doing enough to reduce debt and keep public finances stable as some countries face pressure to increase spending?
Ira?
Okay. Thank you for your question. So Latin American countries have indeed taken important steps to strengthen their fiscal positions, particularly after what we saw during the pandemic. But I think it's important to underscore that public debt remains high in the region, and it's projected to remain broadly stable over the projection horizon. Another key challenge facing countries is high real interest rates, and that means that debt service costs tend to be higher, and they eat up a larger portion of the budget that could be used for other priority spending. So our recommendation is that a more front-loaded consolidation would help Latin American countries bring down debt in a sustainable manner, build the buffers for the shocks that will inevitably come, and create more resilience for their economies. Countries have made ambitious targets, but the time is really now to implement those targets.
Let's go to this part of the room. The lady with the red jacket.
Thank you. My name is Nume Ekege from This Day newspaper in Nigeria. In your presentation, you noted that Nigeria currently is rated as a moderate. Has IMF put into account the new Nigeria's new borrowing plans, and what policy direction would you advise to ensure the country remains in a safe place? Thank you.
Currently, what we are projecting for Nigeria is a neutral fiscal stance. We think that this neutral fiscal stance is also consistent in helping monetary policies to reduce inflation. But let me tell you more about the structural characteristics in terms of our recommendation for countries as Nigeria. And our policies advice has been both on the revenue side as well on the spending side. I think on the revenue side there is a scope to improve revenue through reform to tax administrations, to increase revenue mobilization in a way that doesn't hurt growth, for example, tax reform. And this actually, Nigeria has done quite a lot in the past years. I think like many of the laws that have been passed have tried to streamline tax code, tax expenditure has been reduced, the burden for business and low-income households has declined in terms of taxation. So these are policies that goes in the right directions. On the spending side, there is a scope to, on the one hand, improve the efficiency of the spending. It's something that we also talk in the chapter how much gains can be achieved when countries improve the efficiency of the spending as well the compositions, but also to increase social spending to address social vulnerability in the country.
Thank you. So another one before we go online. The gentleman with the glasses on the fourth row.
Thank you. Phil Aldrich at Bloomberg. UK government bonds seem to be particularly exposed to volatile movements in the bond markets. I just wondered if the UK is particularly vulnerable and if there's a reason for that. And the IMF, in its Article 4 for the UK, said that we should de-emphasize the second forecast made by the OBR every year. There's talk of actually scrapping it altogether. Would you endorse scrapping it rather than de-emphasizing it?
Do we have other questions on the UK? Other questions on the UK? Can we take another one here in the middle?
Yeah, Alex Brummer from the Daily Mail in London. In your opening remarks, you talked about a negative fiscal feedback loop of some kind. There's a view in the UK that the fiscal rules which currently exist are too rigid, and there's not enough headroom for the for safety purposes, and all the time you're having to look at new revenue or budget cutting measures. Do you think those fiscal rules could be eased a bit or changed in some way to give the government more flexibility?
And I think we have a last one. Yes.
Sue Chan from The Telegraph. Given your projections for the UK tax burden and how you expect it to rise for the next few years, as well as public expenditure not slowing as sharply as other countries, do you think the UK is looking more like France than America when it comes to the tax burden and public spending?
Thank you. Vitor, I guess you will be the one responding.
Absolutely. I was just trying to make sure that I don't forget questions. If you don't mind, I will start by giving you an overview of why we believe that fiscal risks are in general around the world more considerable than what they may seem. That is a message that we had in October 2024, but I think it still holds now, and it's important to look at risks in perspective. There are three main reasons why public debt may be worse than what it looks. First, spending pressures from underlying trends. They can be technological change, economic transformation, climate and demographics, and challenging politics at national, continental, and global levels are a factor. Secondly, debt projections tend to be optimistic. They tend to underestimate how high public debt will rise. And last, increasing uncertainty is associated with economic, financial, and political developments. That applies to the world, it applies to regions, it does apply to individual countries. When it comes to the UK, our view is that the plans that have been put forward by the UK Treasury strike a good balance between providing favorable conditions for growth, and the emphasis on public investment is welcome in that regard, and safeguarding fiscal sustainability. In our baseline, the public debt to GDP ratio will stabilize in the UK, albeit at a high level of 105.5% of GDP. Please note that the concept that we use in our projections is gross general government debt, which is not the concept which is emphasized in the UK. According to our concept as well, the budget deficit in the UK is projected to fall below 3% of GDP in 2028 and to continue to bond markets. with a diversified investor base, which is a signal of robustness. Now, in our projections, I could not help but notice that when you compare with pre-pandemic projections, the higher public debt levels are there, but there is a very similar path for the primary surplus because higher interest payments have been compensated by adjustment in other items of spending. You asked about the OBR and forecasts. Our view is that, one, the cycle of budget decisions in the United Kingdom should emphasize yearly frequency. The evaluation of compliance with the fiscal rules should be annual as well. Forecasting should take place twice a year in accordance with best international practices. I will not make bilateral comparisons between countries. And when it comes to fiscal rules have to be adapted quite carefully to the specific conditions of the country. First and foremost, the political circumstances of the country, and so the degree of granularity of that debate recommends that it is done at a bilateral level, and so in the context of the engagement of the area department with the UK.
Thank you. Back to the room before we go online. The lady on the first row, please.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Maolin Shong with Xinhua News Agency. I want to ask a question on China. The fiscal monitor kind of highlighted spending efficiency, and I was wondering what areas do you think the Chinese authorities have more efficient measures and other areas that you think that need to be improved? Thank you.
Any other question on China? The lady on the fourth row, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Sandra from Sina Finance. Actually, I want to following up with the a question about China. Oh, yeah, sure. And also, I want to ask a question about the pension reform, like in general. I wonder, like, how has the fund observed any recent policy shift in pension system, and how does the IMF assess the potential of the FICMI pension scheme to balance savings and consumption while also deepen the domestic capital market? Thank you.
Thank you. Vittorio, it's for you again.
Okay, so it's very clear that China is managing a transition in its growth model, and the future successful growth model for China will be emphasizing the endogenous sources of growth in China itself, the role of the domestic market, and when it comes to the public sector, and I'm answering both your questions, the emphasis should be much more on the quality of spending rather than the quantity of spending. For example, when it comes to infrastructure investment, one of the areas covered by the fiscal monitor, in China, the infrastructure gap has been completely filled. At this point in time, when public investment is at stake in China, the upgrade in quality and the need to look at synergies and complementarities with the corporate sector is much more present. Clearly, one very important element where fiscal policy has a very important role to play is the decline in the very high savings rate of the household sector that helps in the short run to fend off risks of adverse debt deflation dynamics, but more importantly, it's crucial for the capacity of the Chinese economy to grow in the medium to the long term as well. I had the privilege of participating yesterday in a panel about pension reform, and the themes that you listed resonated quite a lot. Social safety nets, including Social Security, are crucial to create conditions for a reduction in household savings. They allow, if designed in that direction, to mobilize capital that can help financial market development, and that in turn can support corporate innovation, corporate investment, and therefore foster synergies between the public and the private in China. I cannot go in more detail than this.
Thank you, Vitor. We go online as we have a question from Lusa News Agency on the forecast for Portugal, given the impact of RRF loans. What makes it possible to avoid a budget deficit in 2026? And then we will go, I think we have Doha online from Egypt. But first, I think, Ira, you can take this question from Portugal, and then we will go to you, Dora.
Thank you very much. So I should say that on Portugal, the 2026 budget proposal was presented to Parliament on October the 10th, and it's expected to pass with broad political support, which is very welcome. And the budget aims for near balance, and this is supported by a very strong primary surplus, and this sort of reinforces Portugal's commitment to sound public finances. Portugal's public debt, which had actually peaked during the pandemic, is on a steady downward trend. It's projected to fall below 90% of GDP by end 2026, so by end of next year, and further declines expected over the medium term. So on the whole, the fiscal situation seems to have improved considerably since the pandemic, and Portugal is on a good track when it comes to public finances.
Thank you. Doha, can you hear us?
Tatiana, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking my questions. I have a couple of questions. Globally, as you said, Vitor, the global debt levels are on rise. So what are the key drivers behind this elevating landscape? On the oil importers, developing countries, to what extent the debt level in this category could affect the economic development plans in these countries? And for Egypt, the report showed that there is a downward path for the country's debt. So I want to ask about the key reasons behind this development. Thank you so much.
So I will take the first. Yeah, and then I will pass on to Era. So drivers of global debt developments. From a mechanical decomposition viewpoint, the countries that are pushing the global public debt ratio up are large countries. In my introductory remarks, I did list quite a number of members of the G20, and so you have these countries pushing the public debt level up. But let me dispel a possible misunderstanding. The situation concerning debt around the world is problematic in many places. And some countries that have relatively low public debt to GDP ratios happen to have also very low public debt tolerance. And therefore, they may have quite significant risks associated with public debt. That's why, in my introductory remarks, I presented the map where you see the IMF staff assessment of public debt risks that we published in our article 4. Era, to you.
Yeah. No, and just to add to Vitor's point, I think, coming out of the pandemic, we've seen that fiscal positions in many parts of the world have not reverted back to where they were prior to the pandemic. And in some countries, we see debt rising faster than even prior to the pandemic. Some of these are large economies. In others, we see debt stabilizing, but at the same point, at the same time, we see that it remains above pandemic levels. So on Egypt specifically, Egypt achieved a primary surplus of about 2.5% of GDP in fiscal year 2024-2025, and this was a result of a combination of measures: expenditure restraint, and some efforts to mobilize revenues, while at the same time social protection was increased by 12%. So overall debt, we see, has declined from about 96% to 86% of GDP over the year, and further reductions are expected by the end of the projection horizon. But I should add that the debt service burden in Egypt remains pretty heavy. Interest payments alone absorb about 3/4 of revenue, so that limits the fiscal space that is available.
So I will take the gentleman there, and then we will come back to the center of the room.
Thierry Augier from Latin Finance. Thanks for having me. I have a follow-up question on Latin America, especially the biggest point is Brazil. The biggest question mark. Do you think there's an issue about debt sustainability in the medium term? Some say it's not sustainable. What is your take? And what is your assessment of the tax reform, especially the latest income tax reform? Thank you very much.
So thank you so much. When it comes to Brazil, we do see that Brazil is a country where the cost of serving public debt is extremely elevated. It was one of the countries where interest rates have risen in a more pronounced way, and where the burden of debt service on budget is quite considerable. That being said, in our projections, we do see debt stabilizing in Brazil towards the end of the decade. We would recommend a path of adjustment for Brazil that would put debt on a more pronounced downward path. When it comes to spending and revenues, we believe that in accordance with the theme of this fiscal monitor, improving the composition of government spending and improving the government spending efficiency would be important elements. When it comes to the program of changing the tax system in Brazil, we have been engaging with the authorities, and we believe that the concern with the tax system is correct, and we will be reacting when we get a more specific view on details, and perhaps you will want to follow that with the Air Department. Air, I don't know if...
No, I think that...
And we will have the press briefing for each region of the world tomorrow and on Friday, so you can ask your questions there too. Back to the center of the room, the lady on the second row, please.
Hello, I'm Supanida from the National Broadcasting Services of Thailand, or NBT. Thank you for having me. So I would like you to shed a little bit more light on ASEAN region. So how do ASEAN countries share similar challenges in order to improve the quality of spending? Like, is there any challenges that we have as similarly? And is there any other way to work together in order to improve such quality of spending as association, as union, or as region? Thank you.
Thank you. Ira?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So the ASEAN region is a very diverse region. You have countries with very different levels of economic development, with very different fiscal structures and very different levels of spending efficiency. That said, there is room across the board to improve the quality of spending, and particularly the efficiency of spending when it comes to infrastructure, health, education. research and development. In the Fiscal Monitor, we highlight how emerging market and developing economies could improve their output by closing efficiency gaps relative to best performers. So you could get 1/3 more value for money by spending in a more efficient manner. When it comes to ASEAN in particular, trade integration is an important consideration because there's scope to do a lot more. And so here, harmonizing and considering practices, anti-corruption practices, procurement laws, I think that these are areas where spending efficiency could be improved across the region. Learning from each other. I think the peer learning component is an extremely important one when it comes to the specific processes that countries are putting in place to strengthen public investment management, to improve the rule of law, to increase accountability, to strengthen and have more open and competitive procurement systems. So these are all areas where countries can also learn from each other in terms of how to improve spending efficiency.
Thank you. This side of the room. Sir, on the first row.
Thank you. Thanas Koukakis from Opinion Post. I would like to ask how should the fiscal policy address the overheating in the technological investment in order to avoid a new bubble in the dot-com like the one that happened in the 1990s and something that had been raised yesterday through the World Economic Outlook press briefing? Thank you.
Thank you so much. What we emphasize in our communication during the annual meetings is the existence of financial vulnerabilities, including stretched asset valuations. And from the viewpoint of fiscal policy, what we urge is governments to prepare in advance. Research that we conducted some years ago shows that countries that enter a financial crisis with sound fiscal buffers can, in a sense, support the economy and the financial system in the context of the crisis, and therefore the costs on economic activity and employment are less and the recovery comes faster. And that is one of the reasons why we think that fiscal action is urgent right now.
We have a last one here, and then we'll go back this side. The gentleman there with the white shirt.
My name is George Uafe from Joy FM, Multi TV in Accra, Ghana. Two quick ones. You realize that more developed countries are looking internally at the serious cut in donor funding. What should be the strategy for a lot of these developing countries in terms of, when your report talked about more of efficient spending, how do they meet their capital needs, expenditure needs, whilst donor inflows are declining? And a quick one also on Ghana as well. Your program has helped us. Debt GDP ratio has dropped significantly. What should we do to ensure that we don't get back to any debt crisis that the program has sought to correct? Thank you.
Thank you. Davide?
Yes, I think like the fiscal monitor highlight three main sort of actions to more broadly to improve efficiency. One, as I mentioned there, is strengthening institutions, strengthening the rule of law, addressing weak governance and corruption when this is the case, strengthen public financial management process. So these are very important lessons. Another one lesson which is applies to many emerging markets is create space for additional spending. And this could be particularly relevant in countries that face this declining flows. How countries can create spending? Typically, advanced economies have more room to reduce spending on pensions through pension reforms, while many emerging markets and low-income countries have the scope to improve and reform energy subsidy, something that actually we touched base in the last year report. And finally, improving service delivery. And digitalization is a case where it can help, and actually many countries, including in the African region, have adopted the digitalization to strengthen, for example, revenue mobilization. Now, with respect to Ghana, I think there are two important lessons that we learned. The first is strengthen revenue mobilization through improving tax administration to create resources for additional spending, including on priority spending, including health. And second, strengthen public financial management to avoid payment of arrears, to increase debt transparency, and to keep the fiscal house in order, as we usually say.
Thank you. We have only 3 minutes. One very last question, very quickly. Gentleman with the blue jacket in front. Very quickly. It's the last one.
Thank you so much. Igor Nemus-Henry, News Agency, DC Bureau. So, Mr. Gaspar, to what extent, from your perspective, European plans to boost military and defense spending impact its debt sustainability? And can you confirm that Europe really has necessary fiscal space to continue these programs in longer period of time? Thank you.
In 2 minutes.
Very quickly. So one of the pressures on public spending that we highlight is precisely spending on security and defense, and that is something that has to be accommodated in a way which is compatible with long-run public debt sustainability and financial stability. The process of doing that in Europe is ongoing. Europe does have a very solid fiscal framework with rules and procedures, and at this point in time, we believe that the set of European rules and procedures will deliver the needed fiscal sustainability and will contribute to financial stability.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry for all the questions, but it's already almost the end of this fiscal monitor. Thank you so much, Vitor. Thank you, Ira. Thank you, Davide. For all your questions, please follow up on media relations. We will get back to you as soon as we can. There is, as a reminder, there is the Managing Director press conference tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Please join us, and also for the press briefing for each region, Thursday and Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.